Hello, this is Dr. Moir Hajorika. I have secured All-India Rank 5 in the UPSC CSE 2022 exam. In this video, I'll be sharing my revision strategy, and in the later portion of the video, I'll be showing the small booklets that I used for revision in the later stages of preparation. This video may be loaded with some technical words, but I'll be sharing the PDF on my Telegram channel for your easy reference. Well, I was using different revision strategies at different stages of preparation, but it can broadly be divided into three stages: the beginner stage, the intermediate stage, and the final stage. The beginner stage, when the reader is in the first or the second round of reading. The intermediate stage, up to the fourth or the fifth round of reading and revision. And the final stage, there were two conditions for me to go into the final stage. Number one, post the fifth round of reading, and secondly, completion of entire book or material. Now, for both the beginner and intermediate stage, I use the same technique of spaced repetition with passive recall. While for the final stage, I was using the active recall technique. The only difference between the technique that I was using for beginner stage and the intermediate stage was that the duration of time required for revision in the intermediate stage was much lower as compared to the time required for revision in the beginner stage. Okay, and now, what is the difference between passive recall and active recall? Well, in passive recall, one simply takes in the information in a one-dimensional manner. For example, when a person is reading through the book. While in active recall, one forces the brain to retrieve. Okay, the important word here is retrieve. Retrieve the information, for example, while answering a question. Where studies show that active recall helps build stronger and better synapses in the brain than passive recall, and thus active recall enables better retention of information. Now coming to what is spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a method of reviewing or revising the material at systematic interval. This interval is closely spaced in the initial stages of preparation, and these intervals for revision are widely spaced in the later part of the revision stage. For example, let's consider half the chapter of fundamental rights to be we are regarding it as A. Now let's say a person is studying for the first time this portion A on 1st of June 2023, and he finished it in, let's say, 2.5 hours. So under my regime, what I followed, what I used to do is that I used to revise that same portion A after 1 day, and then from here after 3 days, and then from here after 7 days. So under this, I'll be revising this A portion on 2nd of June 2023 in 50 minutes, and then I'll be revising again on 5th of June under, let's say, 35 or 40 minutes, and then once again revising the same portion on 12th of June in around 30 minutes. So you can see that the duration for revision needs to decrease with every round of revision that you are progressing it. Now, how do we keep track of all the things that we need to revise in this manner? I used a planners for this. I'll be showing you with an example how I used to do this. For example, you can get this sort of planner downloaded from any website. Let's say on the 1st of June, I'm doing fundamental rights, half the chapter. So since this is the first read, I'm writing it in red. And let's say on 2nd of June, I'm doing Indian river systems for the first time, and so I'm writing it in red. So as per the regime, I had put fundamental rights first revision on 2nd of June, fundamental rights second revision on 5th of June, and fundamental rights third revision on 12th of June. So let's say on 2nd of June, after I had revised this portion of fundamental rights, what I used to do is that I used to cut it out. I used to cut this portion since I was already done with it. And on 3rd of June, when I'll be done with revising the Indian river system for the first time, I'll cut this off. So that way you can keep a track of how far you are progressing it with in this type of planners. Now for this technique of space repetition, there is one particular requirement, and that is a dedicated slot of 2 to 2.5 hours every day for revision and revision alone. And with this technique, I would definitely like to give a word of caution because that is what happened with me. There is chance that you might become overburdened with revision after 15 or 20 day cycle. That is, the revision load will become much more than the time that you have already allocated to reading new material. So what I used to do in those situations, I used to scrap off all future plannings and reset the whole cycle. And I used to do this only and only when I entered this overburden stage. Now, scrapping this off definitely resulted in some loss of your plannings that you had done with your future revisions. But sometimes some compromises need to be made. So you can think of it more like a trade-off. Now coming to the active recall technique that I had mentioned in my final stages. But before going into it, I would like to explain an observation that I had made. You see, after around 4 or 5 rounds of complete reading of the material, I'm mentioning complete in red because this is very important. What happened was that I was able to divide the information into two parts. One was the stable information and the other was the volatile information. Stable informations are those which becomes ingrained in your memory, and volatile informations are those which I kept on forgetting unless I used to revise them. So you see this type of classification of the information is highly individualized. A piece of information which is a stable information for A may be a volatile information for person B. So this is highly individualized. For example, let's say the total length of the coastline of India, 7516.6 kilometer. This might be stable information for person A, but remembering the state's coastline length in descending order may be a volatile information for that person. For example, for that, I had a mnemonic called GUT MKOK, WB, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and so on. So this is a highly individualized classification. And only after an individual had gone for 4 or 5 rounds of complete reading or revision of the material, he would be able to divide that information into stable information or volatile information. Now this stable information is more or less sorted and an individual need not worry about it a lot. But for the volatile information, what I used to do, I went for active recall technique in question answer format, which I'll be showing very shortly. It helped me in revising the volatile portion of the whole book or the resource in just 4 or 5 hours. And so effectively, what I ended up was that I ended up finishing the whole book in just 4 or 5 hours. With such speed of revision, you can imagine that you can go for so many multiple rounds of revision. And only through revision, you can reinforce your information to such an extent that they start coming to you automatically or very naturally. Now we'll move forward to showing the small booklets that I used for this active recall technique in Q&A format. Thank you. So this is a picture of the booklets that I was referring to. There were more of such booklets, but at the time of recording, these were the only ones that I could find, and so I took a picture with this. So I have placed a pen alongside for size reference, showing these pocket-sized booklets. Now, if I zoom in, then probably you can see that this is a booklet on economic survey. This is a booklet on ancient and medieval history. This is a booklet on polity, and so on. Now, I would recommend that the aspirants should make their own booklets for revision because, as I have mentioned earlier, the information classification into stable and volatile information is highly individualized. So it will be the aspirants themselves who will decide what should go into these booklets. Now, this is a page from the booklet of ancient and medieval Indian history. And for example, you can see I have written in the question answer for it. Forgive my poor handwriting for this. For example, who translated Bhaskara's Leelavati to Persian? So I had written the answer as Faizi. And so what I used to do was while revising this, I used to cover this up in this manner. I used to cover it up with a hand or some other books, and then I used to try to recall the what is the answer to this question, and then I used to check. So in this manner, I have written all these questions and their answers. So it helped in revision. So these are two other pages. This is from environment and this is from polity. And for example, here we have these protected areas and then the states in which these protected areas are. If you look at it, you will find that in some points there is a star mark beside it, while in some there is no star mark. So what happened was that when I initially made these booklets, I had put these things which I found volatile at the time. For example, when I made this booklet, believe it in UP, this was kind of volatile information for me. Uh, but after several rounds of revision, what happened was that I came to know by default that Pilibhit is in UP, and so it became a stable information for me. But Kawal is in Telangana, that remained volatile information, and so I put a star mark beside it to differentiate it from that information which had eventually become stable for me. Now, for this polity, for example, you see, uh, Fazal Ali Committee, everybody knows about Fazal Ali Committee. This is kind of a stable information for a lot of people. But so for some, let's say they don't know that there were some two other members in the Fazal Ali Committee, Kunjru and Panikkar. So this was one such information for me, and so I put it here. And I went for multiple routes of revision. And as you can see, there is no star mark here. So it indicates that it eventually became a stable information for me. And then you can see this question sequence of state formation. So I actually knew when the states were formed. This Gujarat in 1960, Nagaland 1963. I put it as a question. I used to cover up the answer, and then I used to try to recall the answer to this question. So this was my active recall strategy. Thank you for watching. I'll be posting more videos associated with study related issues, and if you have any doubts, you can probably put it in the comment section, and then I might make a video on it. Thank you once again.